On Friday the 5th of October in 2018, a 26-year-old TV producer named Terrence Woods was supposed to be filming a documentary out in the Idaho woods, when he would mysteriously vanish. According to witnesses, Terrence had been behaving extremely unusual that day, but nobody could have expected him to suddenly run off at the end of their shoot as they watched him jump down a 15-foot cliff edge and disappear into the woods. Immediately after these events took place, members of the film crew chased after him, but they were unable to catch up, resulting in the young man ending up alone in the wilderness. But determined to make sure he was okay, the crew then reported him missing to the local police. However, by this time the sun was beginning to go down, so the officers decided to conduct a search first thing in the morning. Canine units, helicopters and infrared technology were utilised, and Terrence's family even flew across the country to aid in the search. But despite the huge efforts of everybody involved, the missing young man was never located, and so almost 6 years later he continues to remain a missing person, leaving his family understandably distraught as they are only left to wonder what really happened to Terrence Woods. And given the contradicting statements made by the witnesses, who could be responsible for his disappearance? Terrence Woods Jr. was born on the 24th of October in 1991 to his loving parents in the state of Maryland alongside his younger siblings. Growing up, Terrence was described by his family as an incredibly adventurous person, as he had always vowed to one day explore the world. So as a teenager, it wasn't too much of a surprise that he would find himself spending most of his free time researching into the field of journalism, which would eventually become his major after getting accepted into the University of Maryland. During this period, he would also manage to find some valuable work experience as a co-anchor for a college news program, and according to the professor in charge, Terrence always stood out amongst the crowd, with his strong work ethic and keen ability to listen and learn. So after continuing to build upon his skills as a journalist, he would finally graduate in the year 2013, earning himself a bachelor's degree in journalism whilst also making his parents extremely proud, given that he was the first person in their family to ever go to college. But despite already having more than enough credentials to be successful in his field, in typical Terrence fashion, he wanted more. So rather than looking for work, he instead decided to embark on the first adventure of his career, which consisted of flying out to London to study for a master's degree in international relations. As you can probably guess, Terrence once again graduated with flying colours, but while he was in the UK, he decided to reach out to a local independent film production company, and after taking the initiative to meet his potential employers in person, they were instantly impressed by his attitude and found a position for him within the company, which was the first real step in his career. From that day on, Terrence would find himself travelling the world with different film crews, always making sure to bring something back to his father, Terrence Sr., who was so proud to see how well his son was doing. But after 5 years of being away from his family, the now 26-year-old was beginning to feel homesick, and so decided to head back to Maryland to find work a little closer to home. However, after accepting a job opportunity to work with the production company Raw TV, nobody could have predicted what would happen next, as after flying out to the remote mountains of Idaho, he would mysteriously disappear, never to be seen or heard from again. On Friday the 5th of October, the 26-year-old was supposed to be excited to live his dream as a TV producer for the British reality TV show Gold Rush that was being filmed out on the mountains of Idaho in the Nez Perce National Forest. However, on this particular day, his excitement levels weren't quite as high as usual, and there was also a layer of mystery that he brandished whilst being on set that left a few of the crew members concerned for his well-being. According to them, he had been acting quiet, and just a few days after arriving, Terrence had even confronted his supervisor about some issues he was having back at home, where he would claim that his mother was sick and was due to have surgery, making it difficult to focus on work as he wanted to be with her. However, little did the crew know at the time that this was a lie, but given his persistence on the matter, it was eventually agreed that he would head home early on October 10th so he could be with his family. But this day would unfortunately never come, as right after wrapping up the day's shoot, Terrence was seen talking with a local woman who was handling transportation for the crew and told her how he needed to use the bathroom, at which point he would suddenly take off down the side of the mountain, disappearing into a nearby forest. Crew members then chased after him given how dangerous the terrain was, with predators and abandoned mineshafts being a constant threat in the area. But despite their efforts, they couldn't catch up to him, and so after spending the next few hours searching and calling his name, at approximately 6:41 PM, they eventually accepted the fact that he was too far gone, and realised that they had no other option but to report him missing to the local police. On Saturday the 6th of October, the Idaho County Sheriff's Department would respond to a harrowing phone call they had received the day before from a concerned film crew that had lost one of their members. At the time of the call, the sun had begun to set, and given the cold temperatures and unruly weather, the police decided they would be better off waiting until the morning to conduct an official search, as by the time they got up to the scene it would have already been pitch black. So just as the sun was beginning to rise on that Saturday morning, officers headed straight up to the Nez Perce National Forest and organised a search party to help look for the missing young man. They then utilised K9 units, helicopters and infrared technology, also teaming up with the Grangeville Police Department to aid in the search. However, despite spending the entire day combing through the woods, not a single piece of evidence was found, eventually leading the Sheriff's Department to begin considering other options. It was theorised that Terrence could have been picked up by somebody after running away from the scene, which would have explained why he vanished so quickly. But after speaking with locals from around the area, this theory was quickly ruled out due to its unlikeliness, given how treacherous the terrain was. Also, Terrence had not been in the area that long, and therefore he did not know anybody, so it was highly improbable that somebody would have been willing to pick him up that day. So, after ruling out this theory and continuing to have no success during the search, the officers eventually called it a day, and they decided to head back to the drawing board to investigate some other theories. However, nobody could have predicted what would happen next, when Terrence's father would make the bold claim that on the day of his disappearance, his son had never even arrived on set. On Thursday the 11th of October, almost a week after Terrence's disappearance, the Idaho County Sheriff's Department would make a statement to the public, claiming that given the evidence available, they believed that no foul play was involved, meaning the resources that they had been dedicating to the investigation were about to be significantly reduced. They argued that given the dangerous environment, if Terrence had in fact ran off into the forest and had been missing for 6 days, there was a very strong possibility that he wouldn't have survived. So rather than wasting more resources searching the incredibly dense woodland, they felt it would be for the best to hold off on any more searches, and to instead spend their time interviewing the witnesses to see if they could uncover any other potential leads. But despite their promise to continue the investigation, Terrence's father was not convinced, as he believed there was some kind of cover-up going on, and that his son was a victim to a conspiracy, especially given the fact that there were no images or videos of Terrence from his time in Idaho. In fact, Terrence Sr. believed that his son had never even arrived on the set, as his behaviour during this time was so strange, and they had mostly communicated through text message, with Terrence Jr. only calling his father once to confirm he had arrived safely at the hotel. But given the lies that had been told about his mother being sick, Terrence Sr. believed that this was more than likely the result of his son wanting to escape a potentially dangerous situation, and that he only lied because he was scared for his life. However, despite these claims, the Idaho County Sheriff's Department were adamant that Terrence had been on the mountain that day, and even interviewed transportation staff who verified that they had spoken to him and had seen him run off into the woods. So, without any hard evidence, the police were only left to consider the possibility that Terrence had disappeared that day after suffering from some kind of mental health crisis, as there was not one single witness to corroborate the idea that he was a victim, and all lines of questioning pointed in the direction of self-infliction. But despite their rather bleak conclusions, to this day, the disappearance of Terrence Woods remains an open and active investigation, and after almost 6 years, his father continues to hold out hope that the would-be now 33-year-old is still alive out there somewhere, just waiting to be rescued and returned home to his family. So, with the information that has been provided by the police and the family, what kind of conclusions can we actually draw here? Well, there are several different theories floating around the internet, ranging from racism within the film crew to corruption within the investigating police departments. But the fact of the matter is, until we know for sure what happened, there is still every chance that Terrence could have simply suffered a mental breakdown just as the witnesses described. But another theory which has been slowly making its way to the top of the list in recent years is that whilst on set, Terrence may have overheard something he shouldn't have, and in an attempt to keep him quiet, he was threatened with his life, resulting in the spontaneous decision to run into the mountains as a way to escape. Now, there is no concrete proof of this being the case, but considering the fact that the witnesses claimed to see him run off into the woods, and yet Terrence's family are adamant that he did not suffer from any mental health issues, this leads me to the conclusion that it could be possible that somebody is lying. But if there is some kind of cover-up going on here, who could be responsible? The police don't have too much to gain from lying, as they were only brought onto the scene after being contacted by the witnesses, so that only leaves the film crew as key suspects, as they would have been the last people to see him. But for argument's sake, let's say a member of the film crew was responsible for Terrence's disappearance. What would have been their potential motive? Well, it's impossible to say for certain, but perhaps Terrence did overhear something he shouldn't have, like an admission of corruption from somebody within the production company. Or maybe somebody within the crew was threatening Terrence as they were jealous of his abilities and wanted to make him disappear. The fact is, either way, we will never know until somebody comes forward or new evidence is brought to the surface. So we need to do everything we can to get this case back into the mainstream if we ever hope to find out the truth. But believe it or not, as shocking as this story is, Terrence is certainly not the first person of colour to suspiciously go missing whilst working remotely, as you will soon see from this next case. On Wednesday the 23rd of June in 2021, a 24-year-old geologist named Daniel Robinson was driving home from work through a desert in Arizona when he would mysteriously disappear. After failing to make it home that day, Daniel was eventually reported missing by his father David Robinson after the local police insisted that he wait 12 hours before officially making the claim. The investigation therefore started the next day, however they wouldn't find any evidence until almost 1 month later, when Daniel's car was finally discovered on a ranch 3 miles away, crashed and abandoned with the airbags deployed. Surprisingly, however, there was still no sign of Daniel, and after 2 years of searching, the police are still no closer to finding out what really happened to the 24-year-old geologist. Many theories have been discussed, but with this case being so tightly guarded by the Buckeye Police Department, Daniel's father fears we may never get to the bottom of this mystery, which has understandably led many to wonder if all of these incidents of people mysteriously going missing are just tragic accidents, or if there could potentially be something more nefarious at play. Daniel Robinson was born on the 19th of January in 1997 to his soldier father David Robinson II and mother Melissa Edmonds. A unique fact about Daniel was that he was actually born without part of his right arm, which left him partially disabled for his entire life. But by all accounts, he never let this disability keep him down, and somehow always managed to maintain a positive mindset. Not too much more is known about his childhood, but we do know that after graduating from college in 2019, Daniel almost immediately landed a career as a field geologist and decided to move to Phoenix, Arizona to chase his dreams. He had attended the College of Charleston, achieving a major in archaeology, and then attended a course in Tucson, Arizona, and soon after was offered a job by the engineering firm Matrix New World. Part of his job was to oversee and assess remote sites that were situated in desert locations, where he would often work in extreme conditions. He would also have to travel long distances to work on certain projects. However, this was never a problem for Daniel, as he always had an innate passion for adventure. However, one drawback to this particular passion was that Daniel was known to take spontaneous trips that could put him in relatively dangerous positions. But despite his impulsive nature, he always made sure to update his friends and family about his travel plans. That is, until one fateful day in 2021, when he suddenly disappeared without a trace. On Wednesday the 23rd of June, Daniel had been spending his morning assessing a remote drill site in the desert area of Sun Valley Parkway and Cactus Road. At the time, little was known about his current state of mind, but friends and family that spoke to him claimed that he had been acting slightly strange in the days building up to his disappearance. Anyway, his shift at the site eventually ended and he got back into his Jeep Renegade and was seen driving deeper into the desert, which would be the last time anybody would see Daniel Robinson. As the day soon turned to night, his father David quickly became worried as he had planned to speak to his son after he returned home from work. So when Daniel failed to turn up, David immediately called the local police to report his son missing, fearing the worst. On Thursday the 24th of June, after refusing to start the search until 12 hours had officially passed, the Buckeye PD eventually began looking and sent troops to the area that Daniel was last seen at, to try and find some evidence of where he could be. They were able to uncover a witness named Ken Elliott, who was a co-worker of Daniel's, who claimed he saw him leave the worksite at around 9:15 am to 9:30 am. According to Ken, Daniel was initially fine as they discussed the weather and the job at hand, but within a short period, Daniel suddenly became seemingly distracted by something. The witness stated to the police he was just looking off into the desert. He had a very, very distant look in his eyes. Whenever he turned back around, I would look at him and look into his eyes. The first thing I thought was maybe it was drugs or something, but his pupils were not dilated. Then I thought this was possibly a medical condition or something. I wasn't too sure. I kept watching him, but he just kept looking off into the desert, and then suddenly he just turned around and walked over to his Jeep. At the time, I just assumed he was going to get something out of his vehicle. But then he opened the door, got in, sat down, put on his seatbelt, then he looked at me one last time and just waved before backing up the car and taking off. Ken later told his co-workers by phone about what had happened, assuming that Daniel wasn't feeling well and would call in sick. However, nobody heard from the young man after that moment. Ken later followed Daniel's Jeep tire tracks in the rain-soaked dirt road and found that instead of going left at a T-junction to return to Phoenix, he instead turned right, heading deeper into the Sonoran Desert. So, with Daniel's last known location to be somewhere in the vast desert, the Buckeye PD realized that they had a needle in a haystack situation on their hands. But despite the rather bleak circumstances, it wouldn't be too long before a discovery was made that would blow this case wide open. On Monday the 19th of July, after weeks of intense searching, the Buckeye PD would eventually receive a phone call from a rancher that had found Daniel's Jeep rolled over on its side in a remote part of his property with the airbags deployed. Evidence in the vehicle indicated that the driver was wearing a seatbelt at the time of the crash, and several personal items of Daniel's were found, such as his cell phone, wallet, keys and clothes. Also, one of his boots was discovered lodged under the vehicle, but strangely, there was no sign of Daniel himself. Data in his cell phone placed it at the crash site at roughly 10:05 am, revealing that Daniel had likely driven his car directly from the worksite to the crash site within around 50 minutes. After searching the surrounding area, a human skull was found a few miles south of where his vehicle was recovered, but testing later indicated that the skull was not Daniel's, and no additional human remains were recovered at that time. But after this major discovery, the Tempe Police Department also agreed to help out with the investigation, analysing Daniel's electronic devices, which included personal computers, a work computer and his iPad. However, once again, they were still unable to uncover any useful findings. On Thursday the 16th of September, around 1 month later, the Buckeye Police Department announced that they had worked with outside agencies to search over 70 square miles, with the assistance of cadaver dogs, drones and helicopters, but continued to have no luck despite their efforts. Also, after the discovery of the Jeep, Daniel's family hired an accident reconstructionist and private investigator named Jeff McGrath, who suggested that the accident scene had apparently been staged. They stated that after the airbags deployed, the ignition was turned over 46 more times, and that there was an additional 11 miles on the car that registered after the car had crashed. Also, rather interestingly, investigators soon announced that Daniel had apparently been texting a woman he had recently met. The text messages showed that he visited her home several times unannounced, and the woman indicated that she was extremely uncomfortable with his actions. After this discovery, police then commenced interviews with friends, family, and co-workers about Daniel possibly being devastated by this situation. But to their surprise, everybody interviewed told investigators that he was not unhappy by any means, so this lead eventually went cold. The next big update with the case was in November, when it was announced that a second set of human remains had been discovered while searching for Daniel, but results showed that the remains likely belonged to somebody of a different race. Plus, the rate of decomposition did not match the time of Daniel's disappearance, once again leading to a dead end. But the case was far from over, as during the following months, there were a few more instances of possible evidence discoveries. On Thursday the 27th of January in the following year, officers received a tip that there were human remains located inside a well half a mile north of where Daniel was last seen. This tip was especially crucial as witnesses claimed to see Daniel near a well on the day he disappeared, so police rushed over to the scene in the hopes they would be able to finally put the case to rest. But unfortunately, the tip was later exposed as false, as no remains whatsoever were actually found at the well. So it seemed like every piece of evidence the police would follow would always lead to a dead end, causing everybody invested in the case to become increasingly frustrated. Making matters worse, on the 18th of February 3 weeks later, the Buckeye PD, working alongside the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, conducted another search, this time with more personnel and canine units, but once again, they were unable to find any evidence of Daniel's whereabouts, leaving the Robinson family extremely distraught. After this final unsuccessful search, the case seemed to grow cold, with no more updates up until around 16 months later, when the Buckeye PD would finally release a statement surrounding the mystery, where they stated, "When our detectives extracted data from Daniel's Google searches in the week leading up to his disappearance, some searches stuck out like 'Love changed me,' 'Delete Instagram account,' and 'I'm okay to do things I hate.' This, along with his strange encounters with the woman he appeared to be infatuated with, seemed to point police in the direction that Daniel may have planned to end his life in the Sonoran Desert due to the rejection. But Daniel's dad David clapped back immediately to say that he had only recently talked to his son on the phone and didn't hear anything alarming, later being quoted as saying he definitely did not display any mental health issues openly. Unfortunately, however, this was all the police were able to disclose to the public, which certainly didn't answer any questions and, if anything, created more. So, with the information that is available, what kind of conclusion can we actually draw here? Was this just a simple case of a mentally unstable man taking his own life due to a heartbreak? Or should we be looking into a potential suspect behind Daniel's mysterious disappearance? The fact is, there are arguments for both sides, but with no body to inspect and with the case now being over 3 years old, Daniel's safe return is looking highly improbable at this point. But that certainly doesn't mean we should stop searching for him, and given the similarities that this case possesses with the disappearance of Terrence Woods, I feel we have to keep both cases alive, as they not only consist of very similar details, but they also have two grieving fathers who are desperately trying to find the answers. So with this in mind, please make sure to share their stories with as many people as you can. And hopefully, if we can raise enough awareness, the authorities will feel pressured into revisiting these cases, as I can't help but feel that without our support, their families may never receive the closure that they need to be able to move forward with their lives. Anyway, on that note, I think I'll leave this video here, but if you have any theories which you would like to discuss, please leave your ideas in the comments down below and I will do my best to get back to you. But until next time, thank you so much for watching, and if you found this story interesting, feel free to check out the video on screen now, which covers the similar case of Caden Black, who was another young person of colour that mysteriously disappeared back in December of 2022, and just like with Terrence Woods and Daniel Robinson, he hasn't been seen since.